I continue to pass along what I have learned from our friend Leopoldo Aguirre, which we know him as Polo, regarding Quad 9. I actually did these videos on Quad 9 with him, and if you remember those, and if not, I'm putting the link to those in the video description. The beauty of Quad 9 is that Quad 9 is a DNS resolver, but like no other, because it partners with a great deal of organizations. Many of these provide dynamically threat intelligence about sites that are malicious. And the virtue of Quad 9 is in when Quad 9 gets asked to provide resolution of a site that is bad, it's gonna fail. So typically you may get, going to Google 8.8.8, you may go to a site that is malicious. Quad 9 emphasis is make sure that is your last line of defense, so you are stopped from going into a bad site when you put a URL whose resolution it knows that is malicious. Let me explain what's the relationship with that and what we are doing with flows here. I replayed these three pickups. Let's take a look at them. So the first one, notice that all are labeled as miscellaneous domain. That's the default. And this is we asking Quad 9 to resolve youtube.com. Okay, and that works without any problem. But if we ask Quad 9 to resolve, let's take a look at the second to last example. If we go here, we see that in this particular case, we ask for the resolution of sentinel x.tk, which is definitely a malicious site. It's well known, and Quad 9 knows about it. And you get a failure in the resolution of the domain. And notice that you get here an 8123. We will get back to that later. So that in this particular case, you get a bad resolution, but you do not know that necessarily that is malicious. Let's go to the third example here, in which this is you also miscellaneous domain. You also get the fail of the resolution, but notice that in this case is 8183, meaning this domain does not exist. And as we are looking in here for something in here that doesn't exist as a domain. So the question is, how do I know when a domain is failing because it's malicious or because it doesn't exist? If it doesn't exist, I don't care much. If it's malicious, I would like to, for example, fire an offense and put additional risk in UBA to this guy because he's going to sites that he's not supposed to. But how do I make this application field to reflect the fact that the domain failed? And that's the purpose of this third example on mapping applications from flows. Also, in the box folder, whose link is in the video description, as we described in the first two parts of this video series, there's this nice document that Polo wrote that explains what we just showed before. 8180, normal domain, YouTube. 8123, malicious domain. 8183, non-existing domain. So what we want to do is actually label when we get this 8123 as something bad. So we continue expanding in our definition on the app.coms file. Watch the first two videos. I'm putting the links as well in the video description by putting this one. And then we call this Quad 9 block domain, which means it's malicious. You can put whatever you want in here. And then we define that as a 15003 app. And then in the signature, for the signature XML file, as you see that's the location, we are specifying in here that when we see that 8123, that is when we're going to label this or map this particular flow into that Quad 9 domain. So when we go to QRadar, we should see it here reflected as such. And again, rules, searches, and all the good things that we can do once we can differentiate one from the other. So let's actually edit the files and make those changes. So we first go to the apps.com file and we edit it. Notice that we have here the VXLAN example of part 2 and the WebSphere example of the part 1. And we're going to take this line in here, and we are going to put it into that file. That's the definition of that app. We save that one. And now we're going to edit the signature.xml, and we're going to put all this block in here. Okay, so we save it. And if we have done in this before, QRadar is going to ask us to deploy those changes. So we deploy the changes and pause the video until that finishes. So that got deployed. Let's go back to the network activity, return to the previous results. Let's go real time to clear the previous one. Let's go to the machine that I'm using for replaying the pickup. Let me start with this one and that one. Those are the flows that I sent before. Let's actually watch them in the network activity. And voila, we get in the application. Let's actually pause this and we can even look inside, and we see that whenever we have that combination of bytes, the application is flagged because we see that 8123, it is flagged as bad domain. Now we can write rules, do searches, and do all the things that we want to do based on this information. And to illustrate better the utility of these type of things, I went ahead and created a very simple rule and replay those pickups after I made my change, and notice that I got an offense that fired. Let me show you that. Let's go here, and it's that one in here. Someone is trying to shoot his own foot. I wrote that wrong, sorry about that. And just to illustrate the example, if we display the rule, it's actually malicious attempted. And notice that what I did is that on any of the properties, and the property name is application, which we now are changed, is contained in the reference set. And what I did is I put in the reference set, it's actually, instead of talking, let's show it. Well, but before I show it, I'm going to show you the second page in here. And this is the event that I dispatch. Someone is trying to shoot on his foot. Oh, I made a mistake here. I should have put sense. That's what I'm trying to do. I was intending to do. And when you put sense equal 50, and the high level category is sense, and I left from the pull down resource risk, this actually contributes 50 points to the user who was trying to do this into UBA. Just to show an example of the applicability of this. And finally, to complete the picture, if we go to the admin tab, we go to reference sets, and we look here for bad by flows. All I have to do is put the name of that application, DNS Quad 9 block domain, that we got now in the application field with the change on the mapping that we did. Thank you, Follow, for sharing this information with us. Notice that when we hover, we see the 15,003 app ID for it.